Okay, so we're going to take a look at one of these practical lessons in this chapter 5 of the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus gives 6 very practical, essential lessons on how to relate to people, how human beings were designed to interact with other human beings. That's primarily what he's talking about here. And he set up a formula for how he does that. Now, the overarching theme here was given to us when Jesus said, unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees, now, right there, surpasses that of the Pharisees. Well, the Pharisees, for all of these people that he's speaking to, are the religious authorities that they have been listening to since they were babies. This is what they've been told is how you are to relate to people, to God, what a righteous person, a person who is acceptable to God, a person who is living the right way according to God, they're the ones who have been telling them what that looks like, how that's supposed to all work out. And here comes this preacher from Galilee, stands up one day and says, nah, unless your righteousness, unless you're living in such a way that is better than what these guys have been telling you, you won't get into the kingdom of heaven. You won't be in the place that God wants you to be. You won't have real righteousness. And so that's the thesis statement. That's the theme for this section here. That actually for the rest of the whole sermon. That's the main theme for the whole sermon. Is how do you achieve a life that is the life that God wants us to live, that God created us to live? How do you experience that? You know, one person puts it this way and says, how do you become a good person? Put it real basic. How do you become a good person? Good person in God's eyes and in the eyes of other people. That's something that Socrates and Plato and Aristotle and philosophers have been grappling with for centuries. What does a good person look like? And that's what Jesus is saying here in this sermon. He is telling us what it looks like for us to live a truly, as some people will say, the truly human life. What human beings are supposed to be like. Because he's saying this high standard that you have been listening about for all these years doesn't quite cut it. It doesn't quite get you there. So he sets up this formula where he says, you have heard that it was said. In other words, this is what you've been taught by your religious authorities. What they've told you the Bible means, you know, quotes some Old Testament passages. And then he says, but I say to you, and then he gives an alternative to what he has just said the old way was. So he's like, there's the old way, there's the Pharisees' way, now here's my way. And so we have looked at, you have heard that it was said that you shall not murder. But I say to you, whoever is angry with someone is guilty of judgment and that whole thing. So that sets us up for what I've called the ruthless eliminations, the things we have to ruthlessly eliminate from our lives. And the first is anger, contempt for other people. The second one was, you have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. He's quoting the 10 Commandments. Whoever looks at but I say to you, whoever looks at a woman with lust in his heart has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Wow. So there we said it, the setup is we have to pursue a ruthless elimination of lust, this out of control desire from our hearts. And that led to the whole thing of divorce. And then he went on and says, you have heard that it was said, whoever makes an oath must keep his oath. But I say to you, or must fulfill his vows, but I say to you, don't make any oaths at all. Don't make an oath by heaven, for that's God's throne. Don't make an oath by earth. That's God's footstool. Don't make an oath by your head, because you can't control one hair of your head. And so there's the ruthless elimination of oaths. No, the ruthless elimination of using language in a way to try to manipulate other people to get what you want, to get people to do what you want, because that's what oaths is all about. You say, oh, I swear on a stack of Bibles. You know, the car salesman will tell you, oh, this is the best deal you can ever get. I swear on a stack of Bibles, because he wants to sell you that car, and he's not having your best interest at mind. He's trying to manipulate you to do what he wants you to do. That was the whole reason people would make oaths. And so that leads to this week, which is the ruthless elimination of vengeance. The ruthless elimination of vengeance. Taking revenge. So we're going to talk about that. So what's the old way? What's the old way? What's the Pharisees' approach to vengeance? Well, and let me just make a qualification here. These verses here, this is the fifth life lessons that Jesus gives. And the sixth one is the ultimate, is where he's leading up to next week. Love your enemies. These two, more than any of the others, are why people say, you can't do this. This is too idealistic. Jesus could not have really meant that we could live this way. He is just setting the bar so high, just so we'll say, oh, we're just so sinful we can't do this. God have mercy on us. Jesus intends for us to live like this. That's what he says in the end. He says, man, if you don't live like this, you're like a fool who built your house on the sand, and when the winds and the storms come, you're going to crash. But if you're wise, you will not only hear what I say, but you will put it into practice. What? You will put into practice learning to ruthlessly eliminate anger and lust and manipulation of people, and divorce was in there too, and vengeance. So keep that in mind, that this is something that is, in Jesus' mind, is doable. And we understand, we realize that he is the one who is going to enable us to be able to do this. It's not like he says, throws us out into the water, says sink or swim. No, he gives us the ability through the power of his Holy Spirit. So the old way here, and I call this complicated swearing. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye. No, I'm sorry, complicated. That was actually, I forgot to delete that. That was from last week's message about oaths. And so, yeah, forget that. But the old way is that you have heard that it was said, and you guys can quote this to me, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. And he's quoting from Exodus chapter 21, verses 22 through 24. Now, I want to read those verses just so we get a context, because Jesus is just pulling out one little phrase out of that. And when I looked at it, I went, oh my, oh my. This passage is probably, and it's not saying probably, it actually is the one passage in the Bible that comes the closest to almost explicitly saying something about abortion directly. I mean, there's other verses that talk about how God knitted us in our mother's womb and he knew us before we were born in those. But those are not explicit. Those are kind of a general that we draw implications from. This is the one verse. So I wanted to kind of make that clear, because we're not talking about abortion here today. That's not part of the thing, but that's what it comes out of. So let me read it. It says, if men struggle with each other and strike a woman with child so that the child comes out. That's the literal translation of the Hebrew word yasa. Very debated interpretation of what that means, that the child comes. Is the child miscarried, or is the child actually born alive and whole? And you can, right there, you can know, well, who do you think says it's miscarried? What political or line group? Pro-choice or pro-life? Pro-choice. If the child is born alive, that would be the pro-life interpretation. That is exactly where it falls. So it's so we're not getting into this one today, but this is the context for what Jesus is saying. He says, if the child comes out, yet there is no injury, he shall surely be fined as the woman's husband may demand of him, and he shall pay as the judges decide. But if there is any further injury, then you shall appoint as a penalty life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burned, wound for wound, bruise for bruise. Those are just giving examples of, so what is the Old Testament advocating here? I call it the even Steven plan. The that's not fair plan. So when you're wronged, and if you've been around children, little children, they get this concept right off the bat. When you're wronged in some way by another person, the scales of fairness get tipped, not in your favor. So maybe you've been hurt, maybe you've been cheated, maybe you've been lied to, maybe you've been slandered. Whatever it is that you've experienced in some kind of loss, you will experience some kind of loss on your side of the scale. So it's kind of like you start out, everybody's even Steven. You got some stuff up here on your scale, he's got stuff on his scale. This side of the scale does something to you, takes something off of your scale. So now the scales aren't even. The scales aren't even. So in order to right the scales of fairness. Let's get it back to fair. The perpetrator of your loss needs to get the same treatment that you gave him. Not more, not less. So this is the way to keep things balanced, to keep things fair. That's the even Steven plan. But human beings, being human, which means they're selfish, they're proud, they're not fair, this leads to abuse. So people tend to be more prone to wanting to take more than just to make things even. They want to go beyond that. They want to get vengeance. They want to hurt the other person in ways to prove that they are better than the other person who hurt them. So if you hit me in the face, I'm not just going to hit you back in the face in the same way. I'm going to hit you back harder than you hit me in the face. You gave me a black eye, I'm going to break your nose, knock your teeth out. One well-known politician today lives by that, something like that, but he's got a little twist on it. He says this, and I'm quoting, "You hit me hard, and I will hit you back 100 times harder." That is not fairness. That is not justice. That is the definition of vengeance. The carrying out of the desire to hurt another person. And it goes beyond what the Old Testament said, what the Old Testament was trying to achieve. That's the old way. If human beings were as God intended them to be, we're just, we're fair, we're not sinful, we're not proud, that would not be half a bad way to run things. You'd see a lot of people with only one hand, people hopping around on one foot, people blind in one eye, and that's justice. In many countries it was a thief. What did they do? They chopped your hand off. And they would carry that out in other kinds of offenses that people would commit. So Jesus says, in contrast to the even Steven plan, something that is so unlike human beings' natural way of dealing with those kind of situations. He says, do not resist an evil person. This is the overcome evil with good plan. Jesus says, but I say to you, do not resist an evil person. That right there is what we say is, that's impossible. But whoever slaps you on your right cheek, and we all know this, this is not unfamiliar information. Whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. If anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. So what he gives us here is 4 real life examples that were real. Everybody there would have understood each one of these examples, what he was talking about. They'd seen this, they'd witnessed this, they probably had this happen to them. As illustrations of this teaching that he says, do not resist an evil person. So the first is slap on the cheek. We know if somebody slaps you on your cheek, you turn to him the other one. So what was going on there? What did that mean to get slapped on the cheek? Well, when someone would get slapped on the cheek, they generally would get slapped with the back of their hand on their cheek. So that would, if they're right-handed, they're going to come across and see, bam, they're going to get you on your right cheek, right? That was an insult. That was intended to insult you, to degrade you. And Jesus says, turn your other cheek. Let him hit your other cheek. What is that going to achieve? Why do that? What Jesus is teaching in that is that we are to be unoffendable. We are not to be offended when we're insulted. We are not to be offended when we are put down, treated in a degrading manner by other people. He's saying, don't be offended. Turn the other one cheek. Because when you do that, you are now offering yourself. You're stepping into the driver's seat. You are now, in a sense, you are controlling the scenario. You want to slap me on my right cheek? Well, hey, go ahead and hit me on my other one too. Let's get the complete picture here. That is generally is disarming to a person. They want you to, what do they want you to do when you get slapped and get insulted? They want you to react. They want you to come back, because then that gives them the permission to do even worse to you. So that's the first, the slap on the cheek. He's teaching us in that is we need to learn to be unoffendable. And if you haven't read that book, what's the guy's name that's on the radio station, the DJ? Christian Brent. Yeah, he wrote this book. It's an incredible book, easy to read, because the concept is so audacious, yet he communicates it really well, that we are to not be people who are offended. We don't let people offend us. So from this day on, you've all heard this, so you are not allowed to be offended anymore, right? It's real simple. Just but just the thought, just hearing that is why Jesus stunned people, why people were amazed at what he was saying, because they had never heard anything like that. And for many of us today, even as Christians, we've never heard that. We're not being, how many of you ever been taught that in a message? I mean, you as Christians are not to be offended. You are to be unoffendable people. And again, it's that you do the imagine discipline and ask yourself, what would life be like for me personally if I never got offended by anybody? Would you be a happier person? People might think you're happy because you're something wrong with you. But if people can't get a reaction out of you, you're no fun anymore. So that's the first, is to be unoffendable. And then the next is, he says, if you are sued by somebody, they want to take your shirt, let them have your coat also. So now we're back into the courtroom situation. You're being sued. You know, he talked about that earlier on in the anger thing. If you're being taken to court by somebody, make friends with your opponent quickly, lest you're thrown into prison and you got to pay everything. It's sort of the same idea here, is that if they want to take your shirt, hey, you didn't get enough, here, take my coat also. So he's not just talking about shirts and coats, he's talking about your possessions. If somebody wants to sue you, hey, you didn't sue me for enough. You need to sue me. You want more? Here, I'll give you more. Don't worry. What do you want? Forget that. Here, I'll give you more. That is disarming. When you do that, you are no longer under the control of that person. This person's ability to control you, this person's ability to enslave you to what they're doing evaporates. You're no longer a slave, because now you are acting as a free agent of love and grace. And that is one thing that is impossible for someone to prevent another person from doing. Loving them. If I am determined, a person is determined that I'm going to love you no matter what you do, how you try to degrade me, how you try to misuse me and take stuff from me, I'm still going to love you. I'm still going to be wanting the best for you. I'm going to want to help you. You can't stop a person like that. Well, you can in one way. If you want to get rid of them, kill them or something, we'll talk about that. But if someone has made up their mind to love me no matter what I do to them, that love is still unstoppable. And it becomes, it sort of becomes irresistible. Because you can't explain people like that in our standard human terms. Something has happened to this person to live like that. And you can see why what Jesus is saying here has literally changed the world. Because you just get a little bit of this and you begin to value other people. You see that other people are to be treated with respect. Jesus has changed the world through these words. But we haven't taken him fully at his word, what it really means. So we have that we're to be unoffendable, we're to be unstoppable in our love. And then he says, if you're forced to go 1 mile, well, go with him too. So what's that talking about? Well, that was the Roman law. Remember, they were under occupation by Rome. Roman soldiers could demand anybody at any time to carry their packs or whatever they have. But they could only do it for 1 mile. What does Jesus say? Hey, don't stop at 1 mile. Go ahead and give him 2. Hey, give him 3 if you want to do that. He's not laying down a law here to say 2 miles and you've done your duty. Man, if you got to go 4 miles, go ahead. This again raises you from being the one who is being controlled, the slave position. You become the master of the situation. You become the controller. You are elevated from seeing yourself as someone who's just being taken advantage of to the level of being the one who's distributing love and grace. You're doing what you want to do. Did you guys, how many of you have seen The Chosen?
Yeah.
This is one that was Whoa!
Spot on.
So the disciples and Jesus, they're walking, I don't know, to Jerusalem or somewhere. They're out on a road, public road. Well, here comes a troop of Roman soldiers. And so they stop the disciples, and this troop of Roman soldiers start unpacking their weapons, their backpacks, and start giving them to the disciples. They got to carry them. They put a helmet on Jesus' head. You know, they're kind of mocking him and everything like that. And so they start marching along, and they go for 1 mile. And when they get to the 1 mile mark, the Roman soldiers stop. Okay, that's as far as we can go. Start collecting their stuff. Jesus just takes off. He keeps walking. He's got a helmet, Roman helmet on his head, and some other paraphernalia. He just keeps walking. And they're like, "What's he doing?"
So are the disciples.
And they're freaking out. And he says, "No, I want to take you. I want to go take you, do another mile. Let's do another mile." And it totally disarms the Roman soldiers. They do not know how to understand someone like that. This is totally outside of their view, because their view of a manly man is being strong. You don't let anybody take advantage of you. And here Jesus say, "Hey, take advantage of me. That's fine. Hey, I'm glad to help you out." Totally disarms him. That is love and grace. And then he says, "Whoever asks of you, give to them," period. Now that is wow. A guy comes up on the street, homeless guy, "Hey, got any money?" What do? Well, Jesus made it real simple. Give it to him. Now, I've got to tell you, I lived in Washington, D.C., and we learned that you don't carry money with you in your pocket. You don't carry loose change in your pocket. Maybe you carry a little New Testament with you in your pocket. So if they ask you, you can do the Peter and John thing. "What I have, I give to you. Here, have a Bible, And of course, they go, "I don't want that." But that was...
Apples, remember? We have a friend who carried apples.
Yeah. But see, that is our human nature trying to do a loophole workaround what Jesus said. That makes us feel better. That kind of tries to ease our conscience. But it's not doing what Jesus said. And what was the movie? It was the movie where they adopted this football player. This white family adopted Blindsided. Well, that was a true story.
Well, I mean, true-ish.
True-ish, yeah, but I mean, those were real people.
Right.
Well, that woman in real life, she lived by this principle. If somebody's on the street corner, they pull up in her car, she gives them money. She just says, it's simple. It makes life simple. Somebody asks me, I do. I give it to them. And I'm like, that's crazy. And then I read what Jesus says. I'm like, But what Jesus is saying is, this is how God created us. God created us to be givers, people who are generous, to be helpers. And he's not laying down a law, because we got to take every situation and circumstance that you come to, because in some situations, it would not be helpful to give somebody money. They're a drug addict, they're going to go buy more. You've got to take these other. Jesus isn't trying to just lay down a hard and fast rule, but he's saying we need to be people who are determined to be givers, to be helpers, in such a way that no one can stop us from doing that. We refuse to be offended. We refuse to hold grudges. We refuse to take revenge. We refuse to get even. Our highest concern is the welfare of every other person we encounter. And that Jesus called that very simply, loving your neighbor as yourself. That is the foremost command about dealing with other people, love God with all your heart. And the second, what did he say? Is like the first. They go hand in hand. We are to concern ourselves with carrying out that commandment more than anything else in our life. I don't have to know and understand and believe that Genesis 1 was 7 literal days or not. God doesn't care about that, whether I believe that or not. That's not a big deal. What God cares about is, am I loving other people the way that I love myself? Because if I don't got that right, the other stuff is irrelevant. But we kind of tuck that away. It's just one of another many things. No, this is our assignment. This is the assignment Jesus left us. Here's what you got to do. Love one another as I have loved you, right? That's how they're going to know you're disciples. Work that out. Spend all your time and all your energy learning to do that. You get that down, then you can go off on all this other tangents and stuff. But get that right. Okay, so here's the just imagine exercise that I have been putting at the end of these messages. It's a little different than what you think. Use your imagination to think about who is Jesus describing in this passage. In fact, the entire sermon. Who is he talking about? Who's he describing? He's describing himself. This is, in fact, how Jesus determined to live his life while he was here on earth. And he did it. He did it. And he is now showing us and asking us to practice exactly what he himself practiced. So when we read the Sermon on the Mount, we are being presented a picture of Jesus. And it's by immersing ourselves in these words, literally gazing upon Jesus, that he is able to transform us, as Paul the Apostle wrote, from glory to glory into his image by the power of the Holy Spirit. And that Spirit, the Spirit of Jesus, lives in all of us. He is not giving us unattainable platitudes to try to put us down. He is giving us life. He's giving us real life as God intended for us, that he created us for. Life that is lived in freedom from things like anger and lust, manipulation, vengeance. Life that has been freed by love and is transformed into love incarnate. Jesus was love incarnate. He was the Word made flesh. He is the ultimate picture of love. And what is the ultimate picture of love? Other than Jesus himself giving the ultimate sacrifice, laying down his life for his friends, those that had been following him, as well as for his enemies. Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they're doing. And he was looking at Roman soldiers nailing his arms, his hands, his feet, and saying, forgive them. No vengeance, no anger. He didn't try to, he's a pretty smart guy. He could have probably talked him out of it if he wanted to. He could have called down legions of angels, he said, but he didn't. He demonstrated what this life looks like. And his word for us is very simple. Come, follow me. Imagine that. Amen.